welcome to this week's episode of the Human Enhancement Podcast. This is your host, Jeffrey Wu, and I'm really excited to have Dr. Felice Gersh on our program today. And she's been a well-known practitioner both of OBGYN and integrative medicine over the last, 20, 30 years now, and has delivered dozens of babies in Orange County, but has recently moved into integrative medicine and really looking at longevity and wellness broadly. So let's dive into it. We had spoken a little bit previously before, but I think it'd be great to talk about your background as a medical expert. How did you go from being an OBGYN and delivering babies into really sort of scoping out and looking at human performance and longevity broadly?
Well, I'd actually always been somewhat involved in what would be called sort of the alternative medicine world. In my practice from the very beginning, I had on board as an ancillary to my services a Chinese medicine practitioner who did Chinese herbal medicine and acupuncture. I had biofeedback specialists, I had psychologists, I had nutritionists. So I actually had a whole array of these alternative practitioners working with me. But I myself had no specific training except in the conventional medical world.
Right.
And for many, many years, I delivered, like I said, thousands of babies, and I did thousands of surgeries. And I was very conventional, but I knew that it wasn't enough. But I didn't take the deep dive until after I stopped doing obstetrics, and that was 10 years ago. And suddenly, out of the blue, I had a little bit more sleep, a little bit more time, and I demanded that all the pharmaceutical reps who paraded through my office on a very regular basis to show me their studies and to show me what made their drug actually useful. And I was shocked to see what I found. I found that they often deviated almost minusculely from the placebo effect, and sometimes I wasn't quite sure that they did. And the side effect profile was horrendous. And I looked at it and I said, how could I justify giving this drug for this little bit of benefit with this array of side effects? And I felt really lost. I didn't really want to just do end-stage disease and take out diseased organs. It's like we had this crazy sort of protocol in obstetrics and gynecology. It was like, you have fibroids, we'll watch them, and then when it gets really bad, we'll cut them out. And it would be like endometriosis. Well, we don't know what to do, so we'll just take all your hormones away, and then we'll just cut things out.
Right.
It's like, there's got to be a better approach than this. This is not giving me joy. I don't feel like I'm doing things that are useful. So I went on my own personal journey, and I started taking random courses with this group of practitioners that I had never heard of called naturopathic doctors.
Right.
And I said, who are these people? And they have a totally different philosophy. It's of the doctor is not the healer. The doctor is like the teacher and the guide to help people to find what they need to allow their bodies to heal themselves. Right. And this really resonated with me. It's like, yes, I can't heal people. I have to find the tools to allow them to heal themselves, and I don't have that. Right. So I kept going to more and more conferences, and I was just sort of randomly taking things. I was learning, but I didn't have any structure. And at one conference, there was one MD in this entire room of naturopaths and myself, the other MD, and I went up to her afterwards, and I said, you and I are the only MDs, and I'm so lost. I don't know what to do to really feel good about myself as a doctor. And she said, in 2 weeks, we start the next class, the Fellowship in Integrative Medicine at the University of Arizona School of Medicine. She said, you're qualified. We had chatted, and she said, just apply. So I went home. I was in Portland, Oregon. I flew home. I filled out the application, and 2 weeks later, I was in Tucson. And
wow.
I started the 2-year fellowship, and I finished it 5 years ago.
Wow.
And since then, it's been an endless journey of additional learning. Everyone who finishes the fellowship goes in a certain direction because they know that's not the end.
Right.
And some will learn like healing remedies like homeopathy or healing touch or massage or aromatherapy. And I know about those, but I didn't do like the deep dive into those. What I did was I went more in the direction of functional medicine. I really wanted to know, how does the body work?
Right.
Because, so much had changed in terms of the knowledge base since I was in medical school. And, I had to learn and relearn just about everything. Like, how does the cell work?
Yeah.
What is biochemistry? So I just have been learning.
I want to ask about this because that's a very interesting background, because I feel like, the most of the naturopaths or alternative medicine practitioners want to be, associated with classic traditional medicine and traditional or Western medicine, and get the credibility and the rigor of Western medicine. And it seems interesting that you started from a very rigorous Western medicine training, and going into what is a little bit more alternative. I mean, I'm curious from your perspective, you know, obviously, you know, you don't want to paint overly broad swaths here, but, you know, the critique on alternative medicine or naturopathy is that they're pseudoscience, is that they're not really well grounded in science. How are you, as you know, someone that's classically trained as a doctor, how do you navigate that? I mean, are you kind of picking and choosing, okay, this stuff is actually legitimate and has good data versus like homeopathy, maybe, you know, there's no data there, right? So how do you navigate you know, the good stuff from the bad stuff within this kind of this crazy field of alternative medicine?
Well, I actually consider myself extremely evidence-based in
Okay.
the things that I choose.
Yeah.
But I have a much bigger, like, what I will consider evidence than maybe a double-blind placebo-controlled trial, because that does not work for most everything except a drug. That's the thing. So I believe in observation, experience. So I look at that as also part of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little bit looser than it has to be a placebo, you know, double-blind controlled trial.
Right.
But I don't do things that I feel are not really tried, true, and evidence-based. And part of the difference between me and a lot of the naturopaths is like the way I really have researched and learned about cell biology and biochemistry. And I really try to take what a lot of them do, and I work with two who I love, but I take a lot of what they do and I try to find the science to really explain it.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like I had not learned ever about that there are these like little fibrillar kinds of structures in cells that actually can communicate between cells, like the fascia that covers the whole body acts as a sort of a conduit for touch. So like, how does it happen that you could have like ice dancers, you know, that, or ballroom dancers, that they can know what the other is doing? They act as almost like one creature. They act together as one. How can that happen? Nerves don't transmit quickly enough. But by touch, you can actually send signals throughout the entire body through this sort of cell-to-cell communication that is completely unrelated to nervous system. And so, but naturopaths kind of got that, but they didn't know how to explain it scientifically.
Right.
And, you know, acupuncture was inexplicable for so long. And now we're understanding that it may also work along some of those same lines, that there's these other ways of communicating within the body
With
that
like touch
are not
points, right? Like they might not necessarily be, you know, it sounds like, you know, the traditional Chinese medicine practitioners might not have, you know, there's, you know, the astrology or some of the pseudoscience associated with it might not necessarily be, you know, the mechanism, but there is some notion around certain points within a muscle that release stress or hold tension. So it seems like there's definitely a merging of, you know, the way I think about this is that there's a ton of data out there across traditional medicine to Western medicine and people's folk practices and cultural practices. And if you're seeing signal again and again where something is working, we should think of that as something that's at least interesting to explore and understand more. And of course, some of this stuff this isn't going to work, but some of these practices end up being really beneficial and very helpful.
I work with some people that do things that other people who don't understand it think, you know, like woo-woo kind of medicine,
right.
But like earthing, or now they're using the term more grounding,
right.
Like this idea that, you know, you can run around on grass and get better. But the reality is that we understand the science that the earth can act as an electron donor, and you can actually sort of quench free radicals and reduce inflammation, oxidative stress in the body by connecting with our planet. And the idea that our planet resonates with the same energy that our brains resonate with. I mean, this is unbelievable connectivity between us and our planet, which isn't like pretend. It's real, you know.
No, I mean, I was talking to Deepak Chopra, and I and it sounds like he's very involved in looking at grounding, and it sounds like he has a group of people actually publishing, you know, peer-reviewed papers around the effects of grounding. And and I think, like, yes, one can take the spiritual approach to it, but there does seem to be something around the fact that, yes, there's potentially different electric charges between our bodies and the ground, and we can,
Yeah.
it's not my expertise area, but there does seem to be a physics explanation to why actually touching your bare foot through something
Yeah.
conductive to the ground
Well,
might see some effect.
Well, there was a fascinating article that also just about the connectivity of people as
Yeah.
well. That when a baby, and this also works for adults, so
Right.
but the baby's brain is actually developing with this, that when the mother and the baby lock gaze, that they look at each other and they're actually looking directly into each other's eyes, their brain waves synchronize. Like, how amazing is that? And that helps to actually
Huh.
have the baby's brain develop
And then they're detecting
properly.
this with EEGs, so they're just monitoring
Yes,
EEGs. Okay.
yes, they're synchronizing their brain waves. So there's so much that we don't know that is not testable in the ways that we used to test things. So
Right.
I guess the way I approached medicine really from the beginning is with a big open mind, that like the whole universe is mysterious and I'm going to do my best to understand just a speck of it, the speck that I can figure out. And that's my fun journey. That's why it's so sad, because you probably know this, but 60% of doctors, and it's probably more because it's always underestimated, suffer from what they label burnout. They hate going to work. They see patients as annoyances. It's like,
Right.
it's so terrible. I have to warn people, like, beware, the doctor you're seeing has a high probability, more probable than not, as we say, that that doctor is suffering from burnout and will not listen to you. And it's really very hard to tell people that, because they want to trust their doctors. But you have to find doctors that are not burnt out,
No,
that
it's
love
really
that love
refreshing.
what they're doing.
Absolutely refreshing talking to you, because I think you can clearly sense the joy and energy coming from you describing your work. And I think end of the day, it is about an open mind and curiosity. And it just seems like, I've talked to multiple doctors, and there seems to be a lot of frustration with the system of how doctors and healthcare insurance and how the financial incentives are structured in a way where this is not like a conversation you have between a doctor and a patient in a more of a coaching relationship. It's very much an ivory figure in an ivory tower that's a master telling the student, you must do this, here's this prescription, I only have time to talk to you for 5 minutes because I have to talk to the 17 other people in my waiting room, and I have to like churn it out because I have to pay my medical school debt. And and it's very understandable that, yes, that I think all doctors I think come into the space wanting to ultimately help people, and I really believe that. And it's a shame that some of the institutional frameworks have beaten that out of a lot of people that are practicing doctors. So, but I think it is refreshing. I think you were able
Yeah.
to, I think, go in the system and successfully deliver thousands of babies and do thousands of surgeries, but also still keep that curious, open mind.
Well, I had my own, what I would call a nervous breakdown back of quite a few years ago, because I couldn't take it anymore. I would have had burnout. But one day, with no thought, no plan, nothing,
Yeah.
I fired all of my insurance carriers that I had contracts with. I said, you know what? I can't work with them. They cannot rule me. I have to have a relationship with my patient.
Right.
And that is the primary point of why I go to work every day. I cannot be beholding to an insurance company. So I just fired them all, and I said, I'm just going to charge reasonable rates, and I'm just going to be an outlier. I guess I've always been something of an outlier. Now I'm more of an outlier,
Right.
because I can't practice with those constraints. And I know that you're kind of an outlier, because you're the little bit I've learned about you, Jeffrey, is that you kind of forged your own path when it comes to your own health.
Yeah, and I think that's a broader populist movement within healthcare. I think you see this happening with internet technology, where there's more and more information available to the entire world. I think you see certain, similar patterns happening with cryptocurrencies, with populist movement within financial systems, and I think you see that happening now with biohackers. And I think just everyday consumers or patients really getting up to speed on their own health and taking responsibility for it, and understanding your biomarkers and understanding how to manipulate. I'm curious. I mean, does that seem to be reflective in your patient base and your experience, I mean, what has been an interesting, or what patterns have you seen in your practice as you moved from an OBGYN focus to more of an integrative functional practice in the recent 5 years? What things are interesting? What are the most popular interventions? I know we had talked about fasting and circadian rhythms, and we should talk about the pros and cons and perhaps some of the pitfalls one might encounter. I'm curious, as you're moving into this new part of your practice, what has been some of the most interesting experiences so far?
Well, in terms of like the relationship I have with my patients, I look at myself as like a consultant, right? I'm not their boss. I never think that. And I have the most wonderful patients who bring me information as well. So we work really as a team, and I encourage my patients to read. We live in a world where doctors are not like, they have a secret language and a secret set of code books and things. Everything is open. Everything is open source.
Right.
And I say, you know what? If you want to research this on PubMed and you can become more expert than I, great, go for it. Like, I don't think of this as a secret society of medicine. And I love it that it's sort of open source and everyone can look out for themselves and research and so on. And for myself, what probably got me like the most angry and then excited in other ways was the Women's Health Initiative that came out way back and then was terminated in 2002, where they said that basically their conclusion was that hormones are evil for women. It was so crazy. It's like, wait a minute. I know what hormones do. How could they be good one day and then evil the next? How could they be good for one woman who is still premenopausal at age 52 and another woman who went through an earlier menopause at 46 say it's bad for her at 46? It didn't make any sense at all. And then I looked at, well, how did we even give hormones to women? When we gave them, and we still do, this is a standard of care, we give a little bit every day, the same. And it's like, wait a minute. But women are rhythmic, and I started, we have lots of rhythms, and it got me into the whole world of human rhythms. And that's really one of my passions now, looking at circadian rhythm and lunar rhythm and even seasonal rhythms. And men have rhythms too, like men's testosterone level is lunar. And it's so amazing if you have a man and a woman together and the woman is not on birth control pills, which changes, that's another whole big issue, but it changes everything. But if she has natural hormones and he has natural hormones, they actually synchronize, and the woman's peak of estrogen then upregulates her testosterone receptors, and then she actually has a spike in testosterone, and the receptors are more receptive, and the male will peak his testosterone production at the same time.
Interesting.
So that's the amazing synchrony of people living together.
Is there published data on that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I think I've seen the data on, groups of women living together will synchronize their menstrual cycle. That's interesting to see that also crosses over into, a men's testosterone cycle as well. That's interesting.
But think, Jeffrey, women are not supposed to be synchronizing to each other in a random fashion. They're actually supposed to be synchronizing to the moon. And that you've probably heard that a full moon is romantic, right?
Okay.
Well, why is a full moon romantic?
I don't know.
Because in ancient times, men and women both spiked their hormones, their testosterone, at ovulation time, and women ovulated on the full moon. So women were designed to be synchronous with their solar system, with their planet and their moon. But in the absence of that, when we live indoors and we're secluded from the world outside, and we don't see the sun, the moon, and the stars, then what happens is the dominant woman will become the one that the other women will synchronize their cycles to, because they're all supposed to be in synchrony. And all women would have a period at the same time. They would ovulate at the same time, and it was with the moon. So
that's interesting.
It's
so
amazing.
so if one wanted to test this in a science experiment, then one would essentially randomize two different groups of women, one indoors, one living a more traditional lifestyle with a lot of access, I guess, to the sky and the moon, and over a certain period of time, you would expect, if this hypothesis proves out, that that one subsegment, the cohort, would mirror the menstrual cycle to the lunar cycle.
Right. That's great. We should do that.
Yeah.
And then this brings up the whole, like we had talked about before, about the whole issue of fasting and women and their cycles. If a woman is having a natural cycle, what's the data on what should she do, and how does fasting affect her fertility, and
Right.
so on. And there actually is some data on that.
And of course, it's been a very active area of conversation because a lot of our community members are women, and fertility is of a big concern of how that might be impacted. So, love to hear your experience and your understanding here of how to best recommend and talk about fasting for our women biohackers out there.
Well, I think the information is actually quite exciting in terms of how this can actually interrelate and actually be very beneficial for women, especially perhaps for women who have premenstrual syndrome. Because I'll tell you how this works. So the studies that looked at women who did 12-hour fasts every day, so just a day every day, and they looked at them through the menstrual cycle. The first part of the menstrual cycle before ovulation is called the follicular phase. Mm-hmm. And then from ovulation until the menstrual period begins is called the luteal phase. Okay, so during the initial phase, the follicular phase, during that phase, if they did the 12-hour fast, they showed that they had increased in high frequency waves. I'm sure you know about doing things like heart math and looking at brain waves. So if you do the brain waves, they found that they had more high frequency when they did the 12-hour fast, which is good. It means that they're increasing parasympathetic. There's calming, less of the sympathetic.
So like alpha, beta waves, which are
in terms of, actually what I can say that the way that the study was reported, they didn't actually go into that, but they said basically there was upregulation of the calming part of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic. So sympathetic nervous system is what you would that part of you. So there's the autonomic nervous system, which controls all the different functions of the body that you don't think about, like heart rate and sweating and breathing and things like that. That should be automatic. So it's autonomic, but it's like automatic. And then the sympathetic part is the part that would get you activated, like you're stressed, you're anxious. So when you have sympathetic upregulated, you have faster heartbeat. You would have more hypertension. The blood vessels would constrict. You would definitely shunt a lot of your blood flow, like more to your muscles and away to other essential organs like your GI tract and so on for that time. So it's more like the fight or flight, where you're going to go into war, you're going to fight, you're going to do survival kinds of things. Okay, parasympathetic is like calming, like think of a baby doing belly breathing and just sleeping and calmness, right? So everything is the opposite. You have increased blood flow like to your skin, and your heart rate goes slower, your blood vessels dilate, and it's all that calming thing. So if
heart rate variability is also associated with, increased heart rate variability means better recovery, and then it's a sign of parasympathetic action.
Right. So it has many effects. So if you live and you're chronically in sympathetic, upregulated tone, that means your blood vessels are constricted, you have high pulse. Those are bad things to live with, because you don't want to be in basically a stressed out state. Think of that as sympathy. So it turned out, and is this like not going to be so beautiful, that women who did 12-hour fasts, they had more parasympathetic tone and less sympathetic. So basically, it was a calming effect on the body, on the autonomic nervous system. And that went across both phases, the follicular and the luteal. So it just made them calmer. That's better for longevity, right? It improved heart rate variability. And the thing that was really fascinating is that in the luteal phase, which is the premenstrual phase, like women who get PMS really badly, it not only increased the parasympathetic and heart rate variability, it also lowered their systemic cortisol levels.
Wow. Okay.
I know.
And cortisol, for those that don't understand, is essentially the stress hormone. Cortisol spikes when you're stressed. So if you're lowering that, that's a fascinating result.
It's great. And so then they did studies of doing 3-day fasts. They were 3-day fasts, and they had studies in both the follicular, the early part of the menstrual cycle.
And this is water fast, 0 calories?
This is all water fasting that they did. 0-calorie water fasting for 3 days. And they did these were actually different groups, but one did it in the luteal phase, and one did it in the follicular phase. And what they found was that in women of normal weight, that if they did it in the follicular phase, a few days before ovulation, that what happened was their LH variability and surges were a little bit less. So the hormones that come from the pituitary gland to stimulate the ovary to make hormones and ovulate, they were a little bit suppressed, but not enough to impact on ovulation. They had perfect ovulation. There was an effect, but it didn't seem to be consequential in terms of how the woman actually functioned. And they lost, so the women who had normal weight actually lost body fat, and they had improvement in all a lot of their different parameters, but they did not suppress ovulation. They did not. But in women who were underweight, they did suppress ovulation in a certain percentage, and they did have some alterations, and they actually, cortisol rose. And that's bad. That, like you just talked about, cortisol. So what I would say is that, and this is in my own practice, I never do such fasting with women who are like really, really low body weight. So that's not for them. That is not for them. You know, and if you think of like anorexic women, they're like fasting inappropriately all the time, right? That's what we don't want.
It's starvation. No, I think that's an important caveat. Right? Like if one is underweight already, do not fast. It's called starvation.
That's right. And so this was great that it proved it, that there was, that it did not, and the same thing happened in the luteal phase, that they did better. Of course, it's already after ovulation, but that a woman can do this who has normal weight or overweight. They actually have fewer studies on overweight, but we need to get more studies. But it did not, the critical thing is that it did not wreck their ovulation. So, but it gave them all the benefits. But so it's just, if you're underweight, eat and, you know, don't do fasting. But if you're normal weight or above, this is perfect for you.
That's good news. Do you have we should link this paper or other study in the show notes after this.
I can do that
because it'll be helpful. Because I think our community appreciates reading and diving into methods and the research and the data and the raw data of itself. But I think, you know, that's an exciting news, because I think in our community there's been a lot of just debate back and forth. You know, is this, again? I think you answered it quite clearly with the result in the study you cited. The data seems to be, you know, quite good. And I think, again, let's be evidence driven. Let's follow the data. And the data seems to be positive. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think there's no reason for people, any woman, not to get at least a 12-hour fast in at night, right? Because they can get all their nutrients in. They're not withholding any nutrients. So that should be for any woman. And the idea that they're going to be calmer, how, you know, they're going to, there's so many studies I wish we could do, you know, because I'll bet they had better night's sleep, but we don't have that data, you know, but.
Well, it's just interesting. I mean, 12 hours is not even that long of a fast. I mean, that's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. that you get to eat. I mean, it's just basically not being silly and having like a midnight snack or something, right?
But I have a rule. Forks down at 7 p.m. because your pancreas, you know, we talk about, I love circadian rhythm, right? Your pancreas is asleep doing other things like repairing itself after about 7, 8 at night. So you really, even healthy food will stress out your body. We have lots and lots of data on people who are shift workers. And women who are shift workers have much higher rates of breast cancer, depression, anxiety, and Alzheimer's and metabolic syndrome. So you just can't flip this is embedded into our genes. You know, 1/3 of all of our genes in our body are clock genes. 1/3. And the ones that aren't relate to the clock genes. We really need, we can't change it. It's like I always use analogy. So here, it's like I really could use another set of eyes on the back of my head. It would be so convenient. So I'm going to will it. It's not going to happen, right? You can't will yourself to have a flipped circadian rhythm that you can work all night and sleep all day. It won't happen. You will be unhealthy. You cannot change. That is so ingrained into our genetics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the data is very clear there. I mean, you know, the sun is such a potent signaling factor for so many different metabolic pathways. And you can look at the curves, you know, testosterone, growth hormone, ghrelin for appetite, insulin. I mean, these are all spike according to a daily pattern, and usually the anchor is the sun. And if you live in a box with no sun, I think that's why these things start getting out of whack. So it is important to, you know, reflect back, you know, at least understand how these things work, and to one, make sure we're not throwing them out of whack, and two, can we optimize our schedule around these natural rhythms?
And one of the things, one of my other areas that I've been really getting more and more expert in, I've always have more to learn, is the world of the environmental toxins that we live in and how that impacts on us. And just in terms of the circadian rhythm, the estrogen and testosterone have receptors on the master clock that sits atop the optic nerve in a place in the brain, in the area of the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And there are actual receptors in the retina of the eye that perceive light, and the signal directly goes to that master clock and nowhere else. That's how important the entrainment with light is every day. Exactly. But the master clock cannot properly work without hormones like estrogen and testosterone. They're both key. And when you, of course, age messes us up, and we can talk forever about what happens to sleep in older people and how they wake up often at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like, what's happening? That's called a phase advance, and that's because their circadian clock is messed up, and and hormones can often help that. But if you live, even at a young person lives in a world of endocrine disruptors, bisphenol A and phthalates and heavy metals that act as estrogen endocrine disruptors.
Or even like light pollution, where you're just like looking at a cell phone.
Yes.
You're just reading your iPhone when you're right before going to bed, and you kind of blue light hitting your optic nerve. And
I know. It's so big. There's so many things working against us.
Yes.
Endocrine disruptors, light pollution. I hope you have a set of amber glasses.
Yes, yes. It's in my desk over there, and I have my bedroom blocked out as much as possible with so no ambient light, and I also have like a little sound generator for some white noise as well. So I'm optimized.
Yeah, I sleep actually with nightshades now because I cannot get the ambient light out of my bedroom well enough. So I just wear, black, covered goggles type essentially, to cover my eyes. They're actually pretty comfortable. I got them on one of those long distance flights, where you get so you can fall asleep on the plane. Yeah. So, I'm used to it now, and I sleep much better. I hope everybody realizes how important it is to sleep in a room that's cool and very dark.
Yeah. Yeah, no, before throwing you off track there, I mean, what is the data around phthalates? I mean, we've all read, kind of perhaps maybe the overly scary articles where, there's a pond of frogs and it all turned female because of plastic poisoning. And there's some debate whether that's, a tall tale or whether that's real. I'm curious, can you break that down for us? What are the biggest environmental factors that you've seen that's, that we should be most concerned about, and how do we stay away from them?
Oh, so challenging to stay away from, like the air we breathe. And here in Southern California with the fires, and also Northern California, the fire, it's not just the particulate matter, which is horrible and dangerous, but now when things burn up, of course, you get in all the toxins from the flame retardants and, all the other toxic chemicals that are used in building materials. Right. So, so that's, everyone should have a really high-end air filter. And this all is, the ash and everything is all getting into our reservoirs, so into the groundwater. So everyone needs to get a really high-end reverse osmosis water filter. I mean, these should be standard now. Every home should have these, and you can get the reverse osmosis water filter just for your sink in your kitchen. At least the main water that you drink and you cook with is from that, and you can then take some and, you can bottle it yourself in your own glass or stainless steel water containers, right. Preferably not plastic, right? And so, that's a very big thing. The water that's in our lakes and rivers now is a problem because the water treatment plants were only designed to deal with the bacteria, and pharmaceuticals are just getting into our water supplies like crazy. They say they should put Prozac and everything.
Yeah, we were talking about phthalates and birth control pills. I mean, it sounds like, yes. I mean, birth control pills, as is just high levels of progesterone and estrogen. I mean, and that's going through the water system.
But they're not even that. They're really, if you go to like Medline, right. You'll see that, or the U.S. toxicology website, they list the chemicals that are in birth control pills as endocrine disruptors because they're really not estrogen and they're really not progesterone. They're really chemicals like bisphenol A. Its first approach was to be a pharmaceutical. Bisphenol A, which is a known endocrine disruptor, it wanted to be a pharmaceutical, to be a pretend estrogen. Well, it lost out to diethylstilbestrol, which caused havoc and horrible things in pregnant women.
Right.
Another whole giant story. But the chemicals that are in birth control pills are not hormones. And I just want to, that's one of my missions, is to change people, including doctors, from calling them hormonal contraception to calling them endocrine disruptor contraception, because that's what they are. But they are getting into, the waters and phthalates, which are, they're, people think that they're okay. They don't even realize what they're doing. Most colognes, perfumes, all the scents that we have in hair conditioners and shampoos and cleaners, it's like, oh, it smells like lavender. It's not lavender. It's a chemical.
Right.
And they're phthalates. They're endocrine disruptors. And they're also in things like vinyl, like shower curtains that are vinyl flooring, and they off-gas. Male sperm counts. I hate to tell people this because if people don't know this, male sperm counts over the last 30 years have plummeted. When I first went to medical school, I was taught that like 60 million. Okay, then they said, no, 40 million. Now it's like 20 million. It's not like the normal is what it should be. The normal is what they're calling the reference range, which is a huge problem because male sperm counts are plummeting around the world.
Right.
And this is largely because of phthalates. We know that phthalates... It's
actually interesting. So in medical school, literally the reference range has dropped by 3x since... I've seen some articles about that, and it seemed like, but that's interesting that literally the reference range as taught has been dropping. Wow.
Right. And so that's why you have to be very careful. This is like a very good clue for people. When you look at a lab, a lot of times even doctors, they say it's in the normal range. They don't list them on the lab form as normal range. They're called reference range. And that means that they tested like 2,000 to 3,000 random people, and the 2.5 percentile is and below is the bottom number, and 2.5 percentile is the top number. So you're talking about 95% of random people. The fact that you fit into that range doesn't mean a darn thing.
Yeah.
It's really about what's optimal. So I tell people, if you have no clue what's optimal, just think, is this something you want or don't want to have a lot of in your body? Like, you don't want to have a very high levels of liver enzymes. That would go along with like having liver disease or hepatitis, right?
Right.
So you want to be in the bottom half, but you don't want to have low thyroid. So you probably want to be more in the upper half, or for a nutrient, you want to be in the upper half.
No, I think that's a great point that you bring up, that the typical reference range is just a random sampling of humans. And if you look around in America today, half of Americans are obese, if not overweight. The diabetes charts, all the metabolic syndrome rates are skyrocketing. So if that is like the reference range you want to be comparing yourself against, that is not the range you want to be comparing yourself against. It's refreshing to hear from a medical doctor's perspective that we can actually know what the reference range is about, and it's not this like magical healthy range. It's a range that is a guide, and we can be optimizing towards a range that with a doctor or with self-education, one can actually manipulate these biomarkers in a way that you see fit for your intended use case.
Yeah, right. And I'm a big tester. I love getting information on people. It's so totally non-invasive, except for poking their vein,
Right.
And there is so much information that we can get on people. Like, one of the things that is very popular now is getting like calcium scores for people's heart,
right,
to look at, but I'm not really big on calcium scores for a few reasons. One, I'm so anti medical radiation, except when it's absolutely necessary. One of the things that happened in my practice years ago, I did mammography, and I did bone densities, which I don't do them in my office any longer. But in order to do that, I actually had to have a radiation supervisor license, which meant that I had to have the same qualifications. I had to take this like multi-hour test, the same like if you were running a CT center or an MRI center. I had to try to memorize like a book that was like 6 inches thick. I think in hindsight, it's like, I don't know how I did that, but I did it. And so, in order to maintain my license as a radiation supervisor, I had to do a lot of continuing medical education every year. So, since I was not running CTs or MRIs, I didn't really want to learn about the technical part of running them. So, all the education I did was on radiation safety.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's like every year I had to do like 20 hours of radiation safety, and I kept reading like, oh, this stuff is really dangerous, like why are we doing so many CT scans on people? As you probably know, you walk into an emergency room and you have almost any complaint, they want to get a CT scan on you. And they never ask, like, well, how much radiation have you been exposed to in the last year or in your life and so on.
Right.
And they're now estimating that something like at least 6% of all cancers in the country are induced by medical radiation. So, so I'm figuring like for a heart, there's so many ways you can know about the status of your arteries without having to do a CAT scan of your heart. And even though it's a low dose CAT scan, it's still a CAT scan. And, you can do lab tests, inflammatory marker testing, and you can know about like so much, because we now know, and this is like one of my pet peeves, is looking at cholesterol and saying you have high cholesterol, go on a statin.
Right.
And a high cholesterol is a symptom. Now, if you have oxidized cholesterol, and we call it oxidized LDL, that is what can harm you.
That is really bad, yeah.
Yes, we don't want oxidized. It's like rancid. I use like the word rusting because oxidation is rust, right?
Yeah.
So think of it. Do you want to be rusting inside? So people can picture that because they don't always understand like free radicals and that sort of thing. So you don't want to have cholesterol that gets rancid, because everybody knows like what rancid means. But if you don't get oxidized LDL, that's the only kind that gets into an artery that can cause plaque. Just cholesterol does not. Nobody dies of high cholesterol. It has to be oxidized.
Right.
And in fact, when you get elderly, they've now shown that people with very low cholesterol have a much higher mortality rate than a high cholesterol, because cholesterol is key to cell membranes. A cell membrane, which you need to have a functional, healthy cell. The cell membrane is what allows everything to be transported in and out of the cell, so it can function and live. And the brain is so full of cholesterol, and of course your steroid hormones. So low cholesterol is terrible. And I have to tell people out there, that's why I'm not in favor of veganism. Because people who are, I hope you're not a vegan, I never asked you.
I'm not a vegan.
Oh, you? Okay. Because I know sometimes it's like they're so diehard about it.
Right.
Because, and I understand.
We should talk about the data. I mean, I think no one should be dogmatic about it. I mean, if there's interesting data around a certain practice, there's pros and cons, let's debate it out. I mean, I think if one is so adamant around veganism, well, they should be able to respond. So that should be the way to think about it. I mean, I would, even if I were vegan, I'd love to hear the response of because I think we've seen the data around ketogenic diets, and some of the critique there is that you might be able to, you're raising, your LDL-C levels, but is that necessarily a bad thing? Right. And I think there's an interesting, active area of debate and research around, and I think as you're referencing, that maybe the LDL-C levels themselves are not the root cause. It's a side effect that is not necessarily causing disease. It's just a side effect of a type of diet, and then you also just need it for a lot of just normal metabolic function.
Right. Well, if you just touch on LDL, LDL is not, I hate that when they say you have good cholesterol, you have bad cholesterol. Right. LDL is not bad cholesterol. It's essential to life. If you have zero LDL, you're in big trouble.
Right.
It's LDL it works with the immune system. You need to have LDL. And in fact, there is really no correlation between your level of LDL cholesterol and mortality. I mean, and that's why they had this big debate that came out like a couple of years ago. Should you even have an LDL goal? Like, what's a goal? Well, then they said, no, there is no goal. And the doctors went crazy because they couldn't live without a goal. They had been so, ingrained in their head that they had to give statins to push it to get the LDL down to like 30. I mean, it's like, no, that is not what you want. You simply want to lower oxidative stress in the body, right? You want to have proper nutrition, and it's all about inflammation and oxidative stress. And they've shown that now. I mean, there have been new papers out saying it's not about cholesterol, it's about oxidative stress. I mean,
and one of the biggest controls of oxidative stress is refined sugars, right? I think the worst is when you have a lot of refined sugar and a lot of fatty foods, and you have high cholesterol. That I think that is a pretty, consensus argument that is a really, really bad combo.
And getting back to the circadian rhythm,
Right.
there's data that people who eat a high fat, bad fat, high fat, high sugar diet, it actually changes their microbiome, which in very bad ways, which actually correlates because the microbiome has its own clocks.
Right.
And there are two ways that the body maintains the proper circadian rhythm. One is through the master clock. The other is through the clock in your microbiome, which then directly communicates to the liver. There's a direct communication between the gut microbiome and the liver through the short-chain fatty acids and the portal circulation. And this then, when you have the liver's clocks get all off kilter, then the liver goes into a state of uncontrolled gluconeogenesis. It just starts pouring out sugar. And then it just feeds the whole diabetes thing. But they've shown that the clocks get out of sync. So you alter your circadian rhythm when you eat the high fat, high sugar diet. So everything gets back to circadian rhythm again, and the beat, to live with the beat and so on. But absolutely, your diet is key to virtually every function in your body. And the thing that happens, like with the vegans, is that they don't have enough saturated fat. You don't need a lot. That's the thing. Like, I eat a very small amount of animal protein, but you need some, and you need some saturated fat for having proper function in the body. And you need to have cholesterol. So a lot of vegans are so proud of their very, very low cholesterol, but they're forgetting that cholesterol is so precious to the body that the body has a recycling system in the gut to pull the cholesterol back in, because it loves cholesterol. It needs cholesterol. And of course, there are some pharmaceuticals which actually did work very terribly to try to bind the cholesterol and then pull it out, so you couldn't recycle it back in, to try to lower your cholesterol that way. But it's all approaching the whole problem from the wrong perspective, right? Because it's not that we don't want cholesterol. We want to work on stress, because think of it this way. If you have high cholesterol, that is a sign that you have high stress in your body, because remember, cholesterol is the foundation for making cortisol, the stress hormone. So your body says, oh, stress, more cholesterol to make more cortisol. So you have to find out what that stress is. So that's how you go, and you're on a detective mission, right? Because you have to find out, if someone has high cholesterol, what is stressing their body, that their body is, remember, everything in the body is doing what it's designed and programmed to do. So if your body is making too much cholesterol, it's because it perceives a stress and it has to make more cortisol. So then you have to go find, what is the stress? It could be a myriad of things. It could be you're not getting the right nutrients. It could be that you're eating toxic food, that you have poison in your life in every area. You're breathing toxic air. You have too much light pollution, noise pollution, not getting enough sleep. So of course it could be so many things, but you have to address the cause of the stress, which then creates oxidative stress. And that in turn will help you to have a more appropriate cholesterol and reduce the chance of oxidizing that cholesterol and then creating atherosclerosis. And I always tell people too, no one dies of plaque. That's a whole other crazy thing. You don't die of plaque, you die of ruptured plaque. And the plaque that ruptures is usually the thinner plaque, like the 40-50% plaque. So they're going on this wild goose chase, always looking for 80% blockages. Well, those are usually not the ones that kill you, because they're usually made out of plaque that's like stone. They usually don't rupture. They're calcified. That's not the plaque that kills you. Now, what happens is, if you have a plaque that ruptures that's upstream of that area, and then the blood clot that forms breaks off, that's how you can die and get a stroke or a heart attack. So you have ruptured plaque. The body does its thing. It tries to heal it. It creates a little scab, a little blood clot. But then if that blood clot breaks off, it travels downstream. And then where is it going to get stuck? Where that 80% blockage is. Right. So it's not the 80% blockage that's causing the heart attack directly. It's just that's where the blood clot that broke off from the 40% plaque got stuck.
Well, I guess you don't want the 80% plaque to go to 100% plaque.
It doesn't. People don't get a heart attack because their plaque got to 100%. They die of a heart attack because a different set of plaque ruptured, and then the clot got stuck at that 80%.
I see.
So of course you don't want 80% either. That's true. But that's why stents. That's prophylactic stenting of arteries in the heart, the
Right.
coronary
This is,
arteries.
this is like injecting like a little thread, and he
They're
opens
like
up these.
opening.
Yeah.
That does that only reduces mortality if you're in the middle of a heart attack, and that's where the blood clot has lodged. So only if you're in the middle of a heart attack or you have acute coronary syndrome, which is like a precursor to having a heart attack. But if you, and this is especially bad in women, if they go in and they put in these stents in women in their coronary arteries, that actually has no impact on their long-term mortality, but there's a high risk that they're going to break off plaque while they're trying to put in, because women's hearts and men's hearts are not the same. I always go to, women are not just small men. They really have unique physiology, really. And they have different, they have different immune systems. Right. We're very different in a lot of ways. And we have hearts that are quite different. Our coronary arteries are much smaller caliber, and we tend to have more small vessel disease. So we can get little plaques build up, and then we can get what's called broken heart syndrome. We get stress, and we get spasm of our arteries. So about half of women who die from heart attacks don't even have really high levels of plaque. They have some plaque, but they're very sympathetically upregulated. This is where the fasting can come in, because we talked about it, that when you fast in women, they lower their sympathetic tone, which causes constriction of their arteries, and they become more parasympathetic, because women die from spasm of their coronary arteries, even with very small amounts of plaque, and they can literally die. And then if they don't die, they can get what's called like cardiomyopathy, where the heart muscle is actually dysfunctional, and they call that, there's other names for it, but the common name is broken heart syndrome. So that's how emotions, like when people die suddenly of a heart attack, they didn't just suddenly grow 100% plaque, right? What they didn't do that. They got a spasm.
Right.
And I tell this to everyone. There are like key things that you have to do, and then there are things that are like important. But if you don't address the key things, all the other things will never really fix you.
Right.
They're not that they're worthless, but they'll never really fix you. So the two key things are remove at this end. You have to remove the toxin. Like if you live in a house that's full of mold, you have to get out. If you live next to a freeway and you're breathing toxic, volatile solvents all day long and night long, you have to move, right? So you have to remove. That's like the first R. The last R is restore the spirit. If you don't address the emotional component of people's lives, you will never make them better. You can't even fix the gut microbiome without addressing the emotional component. So you have to remove them, and it could be remove them from the toxic people, right? You have to remove, you have to put yourself in a good place. You have to have reasonably clean air as best you can get. That's why you get an air filter and water filter for your home. You have to be around people who are not toxic to you, right? So you have to deal with removing the toxins or the toxics people from your life.
If someone's toxic, they're going to make you stressed out, raise your cortisol, all this stuff, right? Like it's a real physiological, biological phenomenon. It's not this woo-woo, bad energy vibes. No, like people can stress you out, and that causes real chemical cascade.
Children who grow up in toxic environments, toxic with people, where they have abusive parents and such, they're actually epigenetically altered. So their bodies don't even function right. We don't know how to fix that. We can work with it, but it actually changes everything.
Yeah, it changes genetic expression. I think, and one of our staff scientists is actually doing his PhD on PTSD, epigenetically changing DNA expression. So this is not, this is showing up in academia. You literally change DNA expression with external stress.
And conventional medicine has not addressed this at all. Conventional medicine almost never, like if you go to like your family doctor, they're not going to say, well, let's really look at your toxic exposures. They don't even look at anything. They don't think about the air you breathe, the food, the environment, like where do you
Why
live
do you think
relative
that's happening?
to freeway.
I've talked about this before, but it seems to be the insurance companies don't pay for that. And doctors need to get
Yeah.
paid, and you need to bill insurance. You have to have a code that you can write in insurance form to get paid. And like the system doesn't let you to actually find the root cause. The system allows you to incentivize you to pay for a prescription.
And I think that's why there's a whole like Netherlands group of healthcare practitioners that are growing, that people are searching everywhere for answers, because I see them in my office. They'll often go to multiple doctors. And what happens is a lot of primary care doctors have turned into referral mills. So it's like, and people, because they don't understand that you can have one problem, like, for example, like mold. Well, you can have a mold problem, a sensitivity, and that could manifest with headaches and gut problems and skin rashes and GI problems. So you could have like 15 different symptoms, right? And then you go to the primary care doctor and they'll say, okay, I'm going to refer you to, the rheumatologist and the orthopedist because, your knees hurt and you have fibromyalgia. And we'll refer you to the neurologist for your chronic migraines and the dermatologist for the hives that just never seem to go. And you end up going to all these doctors. It's all one root cause, but they never say, by the way, have you had any floods or water leaks? And then if you say, when I ask that question, it's like, well, yeah, we had a big flood. And it's like, well, did you ever do anything? Did you ever get your house checked out for mold? It's like, no. And then they bring someone in, they take down the wall. The whole thing is full of black mold. And they wonder why the whole family. I look at the family. You have to take a family's history. When you find that every member in the family is suffering with different odd symptoms, and you have a sick family, you've got a sick house, right? They call it, sick house syndrome. So what's going on in that house, And also, have you had new construction? You're off-gassing formaldehyde or whatever. People putting carpeting, they think it's so nice, but they don't realize what it off-gasses and so on. But the reality is that in our conventional system, they end up seeing every different doctor under creation, and each doctor gives them some prescription, right?
And it just clamps the symptom. It's not finding the root cause.
And they each drug then has its own set of symptoms. Like we know we have an opioid addiction problem in this country, of course, and something like in 2017 they're expecting something like 90,000 people will have died from opioid overdoses. It's like unbelievable. It's like more than twice the Vietnam War. It's like crazy. That's 1 year in this country. And the problem is that the modern science, what have they done? They created a drug for opioid constipation. It's like, wait a minute, we have to get rid of the opioid. We're going to treat the constipation that's caused by the opioid,
Instead of taking people off of opioids.
But the problem is that people don't understand. The doctors don't understand that pain is a manifestation of inflammation. Right? So it's inflammation like in your joints. Like there's an epidemic of knee pain. It's like, why is they keep thinking it's wear and tear. No, it's not. It's breakdown from inflammation. So it's amazing. They have studies and like migraines, people who have migraines, that you can put someone on a high plant-based diet, like 12 servings of vegetables and a couple of fruit a day. And for the short term, I'm in favor of short-term veganism, like for maybe 3 to 6 months, because the gut can't really digest the animal protein when it has the wrong microbiome. So you've got to nurture your microbiome. And you can reduce pain by like up to 80% in just changing the diet, because these polyphenols that are in different plants are like magic. They actually act as signaling agents. They help heal the gut. It's amazing, because we now know that most inflammation starts in the gut from like we call leaky gut, and then the immune system, which lines the gut, has all these immune cells that can produce what are called inflammatory cytokines, these like bursts of inflammation. And these things circulate and they create inflammation everywhere, in the arteries, in the joints, in the nerves, and in the brain.
No, I was also going to say there's also interesting data emerging around ketone bodies themselves, beta hydroxybutyrate being an NRLP3 inflammasome signaler. So you're decreasing inflammation through ketones as well. So it's like an interesting way where diets and inputs can actually control inflammation.
Well, Absolutely. That's why I'm very, very big on some form of periodic fasting, because then you do get that burst of the butyrate, the ketone bodies that are very, very healing. But like everything, it's about balance, right? So we're not designed. It's like we're not designed to have mTOR constantly suppressed.
Right.
So mTOR is one of the sensors for nutrients, right?
Yes.
So mTOR is about growth and proliferation, but uncontrolled. Most people eat incessantly, right? They eat like nonstop all day long. There are
Right.
people that drink like a sugar-flavored coffee, like it's in
Right.
their hand all day long. They're eating nonstop.
Right.
They have upregulated mTOR all the time. So they have growth and proliferation nonstop. That, of course, leads to things like
Cancer.
Right? Cancer. And you never have the pause to burn.
Right.
You're always growing. So, but if you have the periodic fasting, then
that
you stop that,
mTOR.
and then
Right.
you suppress mTOR, and then you get this amazing process in the body called autophagy,
Yes.
which is cellular repair, and you burn fat and you repair your cells. So it's all, again, it's like a rhythmic thing, that you should eat and not eat. And all the old biblical things of there's a time for this and a time for that. It's like
Moses fasting
so
for 40 days and 40 nights. Yeah.
It's so spot on. And getting the Chinese medicine, although they didn't understand the science of it, they somehow knew that the gut, like the qi, that it's the gut in the gut, and that the liver was so important. And we didn't understand. When I first started in medicine, I heard about Chinese medicine. They talked about liver stagnation. I thought I was like science, or like, what the heck, liver stagnation? Now we know that Parkinson's disease is due to environmental toxins that the liver can't detoxify properly. So yes, the liver, you can call it stagnation or just malfunction or whatever, the liver isn't able to properly detoxify the toxins, the overwhelming load of toxins that we produce in our own bodies, right, plus our exposures. And then it creates you have leaky gut, you have leaky brain, right? The blood-brain barrier is not holding, and you get these toxins passing into the brain that poison the brain, and you get Parkinson's. So the Chinese had it right, like 2,000 years ago. So so did in the biblical times about there's a time for this, and we somehow lost our way. Right. Modern medicine lost its way with the rise of big pharma. And the thing that I emphasize over and over is that we are like little know-nothings. Like the body is so unbelievably complex. We cannot micromanage the body by blocking major pathways and enzyme systems. That's what pharmaceuticals try to do, because nothing is single tasking and nothing is in one space. So whenever you give a drug that blocks like I have patients, and some doctor gave them, Aricept because they think they're early Alzheimer's, right? So that is to try to increase acetylcholine, right? That's its goal. It doesn't really work, but that's its goal.
Is it an acetylcholine esterase inhibitor? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
But then the same patient went to a different doctor because she has overactive bladder, which a lot of elderly women have. And so when they get the urge to void, it just comes right out. So they have a lot of incontinence. So they don't like that. So the doctor gives them an acetylcholinesterase, inhibit. So they inhibit the breakdown of acetylcholine. So one drug the Aricept tries to increase acetylcholine, and the drug for the bladder is trying to degrade the amount of acetylcholine. So
they're just
in your body.
conflicting.
So they're exactly opposite, right? And they're different doctors, and they're not recognizing. But there are warnings on those overactive bladder drugs that say that they can cause dementia. In fact, there's a lot of warnings. Like there are so many people that take antihistamines every day. Yeah. And they don't realize allergies. That. Right, but they don't realize that histamine is a neurotransmitter that helps to set memories. Yeah. So if you're increasing your risk of dementia if you live on antihistamines all the time, because it's not like histamine is doing one thing in the body. Histamine is packaged in these immune cells called mast cells. And when the immune system is dysregulated, because allergies are an anomaly, we didn't evolve to be allergic to our own environment. So it's really a function of our immune system. It's so common. People think it's like normal to be an allergic person, but it's not. It's a broken immune system.
That's actually interesting.
But the mast cells rupture and they release histamine because it's part of the defense system of the body to fight off invaders. So, but it's malfunctioning. But histamine does that in the mast cell, but also in the brain, it sets memories. So you're blocking histamine in your brain. It's like, we can't do this. We cannot micromanage the body this way. We have to find better ways to help get the immune system right. But of course, that starts from even preconception, because the immune system is really developing in utero. So, and drugs can be life-saving. So I look at drugs as a bridge back to health. But the problem is that a lot of the drugs are not looked at that way, because the pharmaceutical companies don't make money if you use it for 2 weeks. right? They want you to use it for life. They make so much more money, like PPIs, the drugs that block acid production in the stomach. When they first came out, they were approved for 2 weeks of use. Now people are on them for decades. It's like, there's no data. You need stomach acid. It's like their stomach acid has been maligned. It's like no one wants stomach acid. You can't function properly as a digestive. Your digestive can't work properly without stomach acid. We need stomach acid, and yet there are people that are put on it for almost no reason, and then they just stay on it for and now it's over the counter. They think it's over the counter. It's safe. They don't realize that.
Well, I wanted to also talk about, we talked a lot about remove toxins as one of your core tenets. So I also wanted to leave time to talk about restore spirit. We didn't dive too much into that. So I think we should cover at least that part. I wanted to understand what did you mean by that, and yeah, what did you mean by that?
Well, to restore the spirit involves many, many things. One, which is very important, is to have people in your life who you love and who love you. Because we know that without relationships that matter, people just wither, right? I mean, so you have to, and say you're alone, like say you went through a divorce and your kids grew up and they kind of moved away and you're really alone, then you have to find your new community.
Right.
You have to create a community. You have to go out and you have to be just, you have to take the steps, because if you sit in your place by yourself, no one's going to come to you.
Right.
So you have to find a cause. So this helps to accomplish the other thing, is to have a purpose in life. A lot of times when people retire and they lose their purpose because their career is no longer happy, then they die. So that we don't want that. So everyone has to wake up in the morning, have people they love, people who love them back, and have a purpose in life for their day and for their so that's like really important. And then people have to learn how to manage stress, because stress isn't going away. My own personal love is guided imagery, because I have what they call in Buddhism monkey brain. So I can't
Don't
quiet
we all
my
have
brain.
monkey brain?
Well, I definitely admit to it.
You have especially monkey brain. Okay.
So for me, it's like I can't go where there's no thoughts in my brain. I can't. It's like too much trouble, and that's stressing me out. I have to clear my brain. I can't do it.
Right.
So guided imagery teaches me to find a vision in my head. It takes me on a journey. So it says, with beautiful music and a beautiful voice, I want you to picture yourself in a beautiful, safe place, either real or imaginary, and then it guides you through a journey. So my brain is being used to put me in a certain place. And I happen to be very easily hypnotized, because all through my life I didn't understand it, but I would go into these trances. It's like where are you? It's like, oh, I don't know. I was in a trance or something. I'd look out the window, the next thing I'd know I was in a trance or something. But now I found out that is not brain damage. That's actually good, because they've shown that people who daydream, it could also be called daydreaming.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's daydreaming. Yeah.
You got lost in a daydream, right? That sounds better than I go into a self-induced trance, right?
Yeah.
It's like daydream. That you daydream. They actually turned out to be often more creative and have better brain function. So it's not as bad as it seems,
yeah.
If you're a daydreamer, but you do have to focus sometimes. But for me, that works the best to do guided imagery. But there are so many other things. We also teach in my office, we teach tapping, which, or they also call it the emotional freedom technique, where you do tapping. And I love that for men. Because men often, they think it's too woo. I'm going to listen to somebody taking me on a little journey. Doesn't feel manly.
Well, data on meditation works is becoming more and more robust. I mean, I think people are saying it. So I think it's all about the data. No, it's interesting. It sounds like, this is more on the life coaching almost. It sounds like you're not just a primary care doctor for your patients. You're also serving as a coach and a guide and how to. And I think that's interesting to think about restoring spirit, because absolutely you see people when they lose their primary motivation of waking up in the morning, they just kind of wither away. I don't think that is again overly pseudo. It's not total woo, right? Like you can actually feel someone just disconnecting from active life. So restoring that is important as much as removing toxin. I think I absolutely agree with you there.
It is very, very important. So we're having dealing with stress and having quality relationships are so important. Like I even recommend, for example, for people who live alone, they really don't touch other people, that they should regularly have massages, because we know that just the human touch, and they've done this, like they've done studies with babies, what they call healing touch. So they take like premature babies and they do this like little touching thing with the touching the baby, because often the babies are put in, the incubators, and they're just like looked at as little things that you don't touch, we don't want to touch them, we might contaminate
they're
them
too fragile,
or something.
right?
And so they're just like left there. But they take those little babies and then they do this like little touching thing, that they find that their stress hormones go down, that their breathing slows, their heart rate
Like
slows.
oxytocin
Just
goes up, right? Like the
touching.
human touch, right? Like
That's right.
there's
Human
real
touch, oxytocin goes
right.
up. Exactly. So everyone, if you don't have a relationship, you still need touch. Then you go and you get a professional massage. That is great. And then, that's great. Or just get like a foot massage, or even get like people, I've heard this so many times, they love to go to the hair salon, like elderly women who are widows, they're by themselves now. They go every week and get their hair done, not because their hair needs doing, but because they get their hair washed. Somebody's touching their
Right,
scalp,
so
and they're getting
massage.
like a massage. Right. So if they feel so good just to get that touch. So, I encourage that. And then go and get regular massages. People need human touch, and they need the emotional. And this is as important as eating food. It really is, this part of restoring the spirit, restoring health. And, it's very important for brain health, because we know when people feel sad, that changes their brains, right? Sadness is terrible. And so these are so many important things. And we live in a world where so many people do live isolated lives. Their families are disconnected, living all different places. And then we take elderly people and then we put them in assisted living facilities and things. So everybody needs, connection and purpose through their whole lives. And I like to think that I've gone through chapters in my life, so I'm in this chapter, and hopefully there'll be another chapter, that I'll do. And but everyone has to morph as they age, because, like a lot of surgeons, and I was a very prolific surgeon. I still do surgery, but nothing like what I used to. And I only do little outpatient surgeries. I don't want to do the big inpatient ones anymore. But a lot of surgeons, when they reach a certain age, like say in their 60s, they don't really feel like they want to do the surgery. Then they lose their sense of direction. Like, who am I if I'm not operating on people? So you have to actually think about this ahead, like, what else am I passionate about? What else can I do? Like, I have one friend who's a surgeon, and he loves cooking and gardening. So he doesn't do surgery anymore, but he's creating life.
He's a master chef.
He's a chef, and he creates dishes and recipes, and he's in with the ground, and he's growing things. So that's creating life, plant life. And so that's giving him great joy, and he's earthing in the same process. So
it sounds like good. You're in the prime of your current phase, but I'm actually curious to hear about, in the future, what would be the next phase for you? It sounds like you've already transitioned a couple phases. What else is interesting on your radar? What are you looking at? What is most exciting for you moving forward?
Well, I love teaching. So for many, many years, I was assistant clinical professor at USC, but I was teaching surgery, but I'm not doing that now. So, but I love teaching. So I'm on the lecture circuit. So next month, I'm going to be doing a 2-day program on women's health in Dubai.
Okay.
And then I'm speaking in India in February, and I'll be speaking in London in June, and in between I will be doing I have like 4 webinars that I will have coming up, and you can find me probably on the internet with different like webinars that I've done. So
how can our listeners find you? Do we have a web page or a speaking tour or a Twitter that you can shout out, and we can have our community come and find you and follow your talks?
I just started doing Twitter about 2 months ago, and so I have a pretty good following for just 2 months. So for that, it's at Dr. Felice Gersh. So it's pretty easy, just Dr. Dr. And then my first name and last name. And I don't know if it matters, but the D, the F, and the G are capitalized, at least the way I see them.
Doesn't matter.
And I don't think it matters. Yeah, that's how much I know about social media. And I have a website for my practice, which is at Integrative MGI, IMGI, standing for Medical Group of Irvine, Integrative Medical Group of Irvine. And then I have my own little personalized one in anticipation of having a book written and published, hopefully by a year. It's been a project that just hasn't quite gotten completed over time, just been busy, but I'm hoping to have a book out in a year. And that is Felice L. Gersh, MD. That's an easy one too. So those are my main social medias.
Yeah, no, we should. I'm excited to hear about the book and on the speaking tour, and we should definitely continue the conversation once those are out. But I think I really enjoy this conversation because one, and I think we talked about this before, that in the space of biohacking and really being thoughtful of quantifying human performance, we don't have. We would like to see more thought leaders that are women that understand women's issues to be more proactive and out there and prolific. I think for better or for worse, it just seems to be, I guess, stereotyped as like a very, tech bro or a guy thing to do. But I think if you look at our community groups, it's literally half women. And I think it's awesome that we have you on this program to really share your expertise around the data and research on women. And I think and more people should be doing research in this space, because if you look at a lot of clinical trials, they're done on just men. And for a lot of psychology studies, they're done on just, college-aged psychology students, right? Because those are the easiest sample of people to actually do studies on. So it is refreshing to hear about the data done on women, focus on results and metrics for women. So I appreciate you highlighting these issues, and I think we definitely want to link to them. So for the folks out there that are interested in applying some of your practices and techniques, they can definitely look those up and look you up online.
Absolutely. And I'll be off, actually, in a few hours. I'll be flying to Las Vegas for the 25th anniversary meeting of the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine.
Okay.
And I'll be speaking there. I have 2 lectures coming up, and I will spread the word about your podcast to come to, and I'm going to try to educate. They have a lot of new doctors who are just breaking out and trying to learn. So it gives me like a chance to educate the doctors, who are hopefully going to be the future thought leaders and change the paradigm of what healthcare really is and to turn it to what it should be.
Yeah, no, that's good news. I think that's how you scale out your thinking and mindset. Right? If you can amplify and have some of your experience spread out to the future doctors, you can touch, hopefully, 100 of mini Felices out running around. I think that's what it takes, right? If we really want to change how healthcare is thought about, well, we have to target, 1, the people that are actively practicing medicine, and then 2, educating the everyday patient how to be a little bit more self-aware and armed and knowledgeable about their own performance and health.
Well, Jeffrey, you hit it right on the head. That is exactly what my mission is for this next chapter. I still am seeing patients most days in the office, but I'm trying to spread my legacy by having more impact in the wider society as a whole.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you back on the program, but I appreciate this conversation, and we'll have you on soon again. Thanks so much, Felice.
I would love that. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Have a good day.
Yeah. Take care. That was a really fun conversation with Dr. Gersh. I actually, she just had such a great, vibrant energy and clearly so passionate about the space and helping patients. And I think those are the voices that we like to highlight on our program. And I think something that it gives me just added energy. I think Zil, our producer, was listening on the conversation. I think it was, again, so important to have diverse voices and serious voices that are just so passionate about helping people. So we'll definitely have her back on the program. And as we're wrapping up, we're planning to do events, in-person events in 2018. And I think she would be a good person to be giving a keynote there. As always, we love the questions and the feedback for this program. So send us a note. Zil will see all those messages. I'll see all those messages. Love to improve and continue providing good content and education for our community here. As always, find us on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and YouTube, and also Spotify. As Zil mentioned, we're officially approved as an official Spotify podcast. So our audience is growing phenomenally. I think we literally are growing like 30% month over month now, which is huge. So, and I think it's been funny because I've been seeing people just at cafes, and people come up to me saying like, "Oh, I like your podcast." So it's really rewarding to both Zilla and I to hear the traction and growth of this podcast. So appreciate the support, and share out the podcast if you think this is good. Until next time, Jeff is out. Peace.